the hell writes things like this? Who's this guy? Why is he here? So we're just cutting to here now. Why not? They couldn't even write the animals well. How does that make any sense? How could he be there now like this? They'll just take off. Who's this guy? People act. Fuck me. What did I just watch?
This is what happens when I pick a well-known movie to review. The game leading up to it becomes so easy that multiple assholes can get the right answer. So now I've got 2 movies to review this month. Zachariah and Dan in Real Life. Rather than write out my thoughts and perform them for you, I decided to grab Mark and James, the guys who picked these fucking movies, and I compared my thoughts and theirs. I figured that doing these interviews would be a refreshing change of pace, and it's definitely not a cheap shortcut to minimize my workload in the face of approaching deadlines. So first up, I spoke with Mark about the first acid western, Zachariah.
Okay, I should start out by saying I didn't exactly see the movie in order, and for some reason, some of the files that the person uploaded was only available. Like they literally did not have like parts. So I started out 10 minutes into the movie, had to stop like right near the end. I watched the beginning, so the first 10 minutes that led up to where I started, and then I watched the last 25 minutes, so I completely mementoed that shit.
Well, and the first 10 minutes has one of the most painfully bizarre moments in the film. When they get the gun in the mail, and all of a sudden they're both just like brilliant with it.
Oh, that's the weird part. I thought the part where they made a silver bullet because they were afraid of vampires. Yeah, for the most part, it's just a Western with psychedelic music thrown in.
Yeah, well, and with modern instruments, which is sort of a minorly nonsensical, all things considered.
Yeah, and I told you before we started this recording, that I felt that this movie kind of set up its own universe, and while the first couple times might have been considered weird, it sort of is like that Scott Pilgrim versus the World situation where you just kind of say, okay, this is the world I'm living in. This is what I consider normal. And after you take that into account, it's not that different than any other Western.
No, in that sense, it's not. I mean, in fact, the story arc they use of the violent man starting to regret his own violence is like old as time, right? I mean, that's like one of the original Western stories in a lot of ways. It's the plot of Shane.
Yeah, it's just this movie does it awkwardly.
And the writing in this film is just goddamn atrocious. And well, if you need proof that the writers of this film didn't know what the hell they were doing, when we go from the first act to the second act, they clearly didn't know how to transition. So they have legendary fiddle player Doug Kershaw appear out of nowhere for no reason and sing to the main character exactly what's going to happen in the second act. He pretty much gives the entire second act away in this song that nobody questions. It just happens, and then immediately it ends, and don't question it.
Wow, I wish I could have got that, but the audio in this movie was so bad. And I'm not talking just like what I saw on YouTube, the track, the audio track being misaligned.
Oh yeah.
It was just, I couldn't hear anything, and then the music would come in, and once the music came on, you knew they didn't give a shit about anything else. It was music first, then people talking. The ending, I think Bunny said it best. She's just like, is this a gay thing? Seems like a gay thing.
The last scene between Zachariah and I can't think of that actor's name, but Don Johnson's the other guy. Really young Don Johnson. Yeah.
I saw his name in the credits, and I'm like, I know that name. And I didn't put 2 and 2 together, maybe because, I don't know, in this film, 2 and 2 is 5. It's that retarded.
Yes, it is. Well, and yeah, he's really young. I mean, this is before A Boy and His Dog, which I think is a lot of people, first part a lot of people associate Don Johnson with.
Let's see, what happens at the end? Okay, so they're supposed to have this duel where it's pacifism against somebody who, for some reason, just decided to murder everyone. Like, I understand he wants to be a gunfighter. That's how they both started. Zachariah takes the peaceful path. He takes the more violent path. Except there's no reason for him to do the things that he does. He just kills the guy who's basically giving him food and shelter and then takes off into the desert. This is a sociopath.
Well, he's proving he's the best. Yeah, it's my knowledge of Western tropes is the only reason I had any idea what the hell was going on. Although we had the whole scene where they were like he was trying to get Zachariah to fight him, and Zachariah's like delaying and cleaning his gun and stupid shit 'cause he doesn't want to fight him.
That was at least decently done. I'll
Yeah,
give it
that was
that.
one of the better executed moments. Yeah, and then of course how he flips makes no fucking sense, but
And then there's the part that broke it because I'm like, this is actually a pretty good scene. I was enjoying it. I was liking how Zachariah was actually outwitting
Don Johnson.
Don Johnson. He's gonna shoot Don Johnson, and then he's like, I have no bullets. And then Don Johnson just says, hey, you still have this one bullet left. Now, it's a symbol of friendship because it's what they established at the beginning of the movie. But there was no reason for them to be like, this isn't for people. This is for killing vampires. I'm like, I'm watching the wrong fucking movie. Maybe there should have been
Oh.
some vampires in here. That would have been entertaining. You know what's funny?
Huh.
After all that weird shit that happened, you know what's the part that really made me go, what the fuck? When it
What?
actually went to an old Western soundtrack at the end of the movie.
Oh, it does, doesn't it? Yeah.
It's like, wow, did everyone just quit and they couldn't hire them back? And just like, well, what's in the public domain? I mean, I can't really recommend it to people because it's not entertaining enough.
No.
And it's not weird enough to be one of those things where it's like, fuck, you gotta check this out.
Well, what you want to do is almost show people like the 4 or 5 really strange scenes, like the Doug Kershaw scene and the old man's death scene, like just like those, and then the end scene, like if you just show people the climax, that'd almost be enough.
Who did that better? Oh yeah, didn't Ang Lee do that better in that movie with cowboys that were gay?
I think he did. At that point, I was thankful the film was over the first time I watched it. I was like, okay, God.
It's like I'm done. This movie has on to the next one. Probably something I honestly will probably forget it. I'm
Yeah,
surprised
no.
you remembered it.
I remembered it because somebody had recommended it to me, and they said, "Hey, this is considered the first ever acid western." I'm like, hey, I really like some acid westerns. I'll check this out. And then it was just so laughably dumb at times. I'm like, what the? How is this the first of a much more credible genre, a subgenre?
Like describe an acid western a little bit more because to me I can see how somebody would take this and be like, I think I can do this better. It kind of boggles my mind that there's a whole genre around it. Like a whole bunch of people said,
It's
"Oh, I could do this much better."
it's not a big subgenre because it really acid western though kind of gets this anything that is a western with the non-traditional music. So it's got the it's typically rock and roll, but something that's not traditionally the western score, and usually it's got sort of antithetical western trope themes in it. The best example in my mind is Jim Jarmusch's Dead Man.
That's
Yeah.
the Johnny Depp joint, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty decent film. Got a good sense of humor. If you want to watch an acid western that's a little more action packed and a little more traditional western in a lot of ways, Pat Garrett and the Billy the Kid is probably a little bit more that way. It's Sam Peckinpah film.
Well, it's Sam Peckinpah, so maybe
Yeah.
it's decent. What would you consider like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? Because that sort of had like a modern soundtrack within old timey field.
I've seen it labeled both ways. Honestly, I've seen some lists that include it and some lists that don't, especially where the two roguish villains of the film, are the heroes of the film.
Yeah.
I don't know. I suppose it is, and if it is, it's by far and away the most. It's probably the best best film in the subgenre. Well, the thing with Butch Cassidy, it does have actually a very traditional soundtrack that's not played abundantly through the film, but you can actually purchase it, and it's a very common orchestral Western theme.
Well, all I can say before I wrap this up is that I was watching at the gym. I was really digging the whole Western thing. I'm like, it had its hit and miss moments, and I was getting ready to watch the ending, so I had myself a nice cowboy dinner. I barbecued some beef ribs out in the fucking cold because it's like 40 degrees right now. Came in, sat down and watched Zachariah, and I saw an old man dancing, sit down, and die.
We always talk about it, so bad it's good. That may be the so bad it's good scene from the film.
Yeah, this definitely has like those moments, but
Yeah.
overall it was all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for picking it, and until next time when I drag you out to something even worse,
All right. Well, thanks for being the only other person who's now seen this awful film.
and I will completely forget it.
As strange as Zachariah was, the biggest surprise came from Dan in real life. What I expected to be a mediocre dramedy cashing in the wake of Little Miss Sunshine ended up being a strange enough movie experience that it could have had a full episode of its own. But that would have meant fucking up my schedule, and I'd rather reserve that time for movies about Nazis on the moon or strange Japanese shit like Vampire Lawyers. So here's what you get. An interview with James about Dan in real life.
But yeah, let's talk about Dan in real life, because this was something. You know, when you first gave it to me, I thought you were overreacting a little bit. I thought it was just going to be in like a knockoff indie comedy that in sort of in the same vein of Little Miss Sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way it was, but it fucked up on almost every level. Why don't you tell me like how you first saw it?
It's one of those things where I was at the library. It was sitting there. You know, you just think, oh, all right, I could go for a laugh. Oh, how wrong I was. This was a special kind of terrible. The only reason I finished it was because I thought that my girlfriend was enjoying it. And we do this to each other all the time where I think she likes something, so I don't tell her to turn it off, and she thinks I like it. So we just sit there, and then afterwards we look at each other and go, that was fucking horrible.
You know, that's funny. My girlfriend and I do the exact same thing, and it actually happened with this movie. I mean, of course, this wasn't a situation like you where you just rented and you thought the other person liked it. This was, I have to fucking sit through it no matter what.
I thought the same thing that you did, which was, well, it'll probably be kind of like Little Miss Sunshine. And I liked Little Miss Sunshine. I thought, well, you know, I didn't think it was going to be great.
Why don't you tell me just like what really bugged you?
The thing that hit me immediately was that his daughters, I hated these girls. I mean, I watched it and I thought that the writer of the movie was trying to portray them as wise beyond their years.
Which is actually a trope of a lot of indie movies, or at least the Hollywood mainstream movies that try to be indie.
Yeah.
I really think that all these indie movies that came out around the time of Little Miss Sunshine and Juno were really just an excuse to slash budgets and not so much to enhance the quality of what could otherwise be a decent movie. I mean, it's a tried but true story about a guy who goes on a retreat, or he basically goes to see his family. It's basically Meet the Fockers or Meet the Parents, whatever the hell, which one came first, I don't know, I lost track. It tried too hard to be this dramedy, and it kind of forgot that the thing that everyone likes about those indie movies is that they're fun people to hang out with.
Well, yeah, I mean, say what you will about a movie like Juno, but there were no characters in there in Juno that I thought were downright awful, terrible, horrible people. And this movie was filled with them. And you were supposed to identify with them or to think that they were this heartwarming, quirky family. And every one of them was so dysfunctional that they were practically crazy. You know, there was the one part where I was baffled by it. My jaw was literally hanging open, where they're sitting around a piano singing a song that apparently they had made up about the girl that Steve Carell's supposed to take out that night, that they all called her Pig Girl or Pig Face.
It was needlessly cruel, and the fact that everyone joined in the family, you're right, there's something wrong with them, but they took the wrong angle. Maybe if this was a horror movie, can you imagine this movie as Texas Chainsaw Massacre? But I really agree with you about those daughters. I mean, the older one, her big thing, like her big problem, was that Dan wouldn't let her drive.
Yeah.
Okay. Not really that big of a problem. They really played it up more than it really had to be.
But the oldest one was bad, but the middle one.
Oh, let's hold off on her for a second. Because let's get to the young one, because the middle one is the one that made my brain explode. The youngest daughter is the one who had that mentality of, I'm smarter than my age, which is the trope we just talked about. And that's a big problem. It's not like they eventually had her talking like a kid. Because that might have been kind of funny, just like, because he's doing the whole thing in the cars, like, who told you to say that? Who told you to say that smart thing that you just said? No, I can think for myself. I thought, all right, maybe they'll play on that later, assuming this is a good movie.
I mean, she was the least obnoxious of the three.
If I recall, you also see her less than the others.
You see her less than the others, but I also got the distinct sense from a couple of different lines that she had that she was on the same trajectory as the other two.
Like
Uh,
what?
I do remember just a couple parts, especially towards the end where she gets really snotty. Because the thing that got to me about all three of them was they establish immediately that Steve Carell is this doting, caring father, and they treat him like shit. They practically hate him. I just remember thinking, get off his fucking back. I mean, I just couldn't believe the amount of disrespect, and I'm as mad as I was at them, I'm getting even angrier at him for not saying, sticking his finger in their face and going, no.
Well, that'll be an interesting point to come back to. Dan and his relationship with his daughters. I guess you could also say that it might be Dan's fault. I mean, his parenting style isn't exactly up to par, but we'll get back to that because we gotta talk about this middle bitch. She has the worst story arc. Her whole thing is, I can't have my boyfriend. I'm in love with him. That's not the worst part. I could understand that. I can say, okay, that's bad writing. They tied this horrible message that doesn't make any sense in real life or fake
Mhm.
into this story. And what the fuck is wrong with a group of people who can't understand that you can't fall in love with someone after 3 days? Dan falls in love with a girl after 3 days, which, by the way, that whole progress was bullshit.
Yeah.
It was creepy and stalkerish. And the middle daughter has a boyfriend that she fell in love with after 3 days, and suddenly she's heartbroken and whining throughout
Yeah.
the whole movie.
There was a scene that, I mean, it was sort of the scene in the movie that broke me. I remember that he was sneaking around somehow. He got caught with the woman, his sister's or his brother's girlfriend, and he's sneaking around, and he ends up trying to get past his daughter, who is on the phone with her boyfriend, who she's not supposed to be talking to. And she turns and she sees him crawling on the floor, and she's like, "Are you spying on me?" And she proceeds to read him the riot act, which he says nothing about. And then she gets back on the phone while he's still within earshot and says, "No, it's just my dad. He's a freak." I just remember thinking, if any of my kids ever spoke to me that way, I would take the phone out of their hand, I would throw it out the fucking window, and I'd be like, "Guess what? You're not leaving this room until you're 18." I was offended as a father. I was offended in every possible way that I could be offended.
I mean, let's break this down. We're gonna jump into the movie real quick. The brother, Dane Cook. I think you're supposed to think he's a douchebag because in his past he was a womanizer. But he's found the person that he wants to settle down with, who, Dan happens to realize that he wants her
Mhm.
after spending, I don't know, let's say 3 hours. I mean, now I've probably had conversations with people for 3 hours where at the end I wanted to fuck them, but maybe not marry them. So we're supposed to assume that he's going to treat this girl bad. He's going to do something. He's going to be the douchebag. He's not.
No.
At no point does he ever do anything douchebaggy. In fact, when Dan finally gets the girl, his brother is so fucked over for no reason. And they're both to blame. In fact, at the end, they try to make it seem like, oh, well, he was a douchebag all along because the girl who Dan was set up on a blind date with is in the car and picks him up. The
Mhm.
brother, Dane Cook. So they drive off together, and you're supposed to think, oh, well, he was never going to treat her nice. No, 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 no. Let's take this back for a second and logically progress it and not just do what the movie is forcing down our throats. Because the movie forces everything. It doesn't do anything naturally. Now, Dan goes off, gets the girl. Dane Cook drives off with this random person. Now, why did he even invite this person to take him anywhere? Well, he was a horn dog, tried to change his ways, got royally fucked over by Dan. What's he going to revert back to? If the thing that he tried to do failed, he's going to go back to what he perceives to be normal, except he's had that life changing thing happened to him. It's that life-changing moment. He found the girl. And as we know from other movies, if you have this life-changing moment, you can't go back to what you knew. He's
Yeah.
going to go off with that girl, and because he doesn't have a happy ending, their shit is going to be hollow, it's not going to work, and they're either going to end up in a dead-end relationship, or he's going to put a gun in his mouth.
Because the whole movie, too, it's not just that he was a womanizer and you're waiting for that thing where, oh, he's cheating on her. That's what'll make it okay for Dan to hook up with her. But the whole movie, Dane Cook is so sweet to her. And there's a part, isn't there a part where he sings a song to her?
Yeah,
Or,
except he doesn't know how to sing it well,
yeah.
and he has Dan help him.
And it's just so sappy and corny that you get the feeling like, is the movie trying to tell me that this is the person I'm supposed to be rooting for? Because I thought the movie was trying to point me towards Dan, but Dane Cook actually looks like he's the nicer guy that actually genuinely cares about her.
Let's put ourselves back in the story for a minute. So you have this conversation with a wonderful woman. You manage to get her number. You go back to your house, find out that it's your brother's girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
You two realize that, oh well, I guess this can't happen because you don't want to fuck over your brother, and she is in a relationship. What happens if you were Dan? I'm not saying what did happen. I'm saying what would you do as a logical person?
As a logical person, the first thing I do is I walk through the door, I realize who she is, I say to my brother, could you come here a minute? And I say, yeah, this whore just gave me her number in the bookstore.
Well, that was a lot darker than what I was thinking, but at the same time, it's at least that's where the movie would end. If I was Dan, I would see her, be like, oh crap, pull her aside and be like, yeah, I didn't know that. This can't happen. Instead, the movie decides that it can't be a movie if it ends on the logical note.
Mm.
Which brings the question, why even bother making the movie if you have to force a conflict that doesn't make any sense?
Well, yeah, I mean it's a thing that the movie sets up that would never happen. I mean, it's practically a science fiction plot.
If this was in a sci-fi universe, it would be the fucking Stepford Wives, because
Yeah.
holy shit, that family does not exist in real life. I mean, maybe in Leave It to Beaver, where they go off on a vacation and they all spend days playing touch football and exercising in the morning and going on little trips.
Yeah, the entire family was unbearable. It was just I would not have survived an hour with them. I would have run from the house screaming.
Yeah, they did do a lot of crazy things, but and I hope it's not just me being a fucked up person where it's like no one has this much fun with their family.
No, it's not that I've had the same reaction. I was like, families don't do this. This is what somebody who doesn't have a family thinks families do.
Well, that was just fucking depressing as shit. Well, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
There's only two movies I can say I honestly outright hate. Aliens versus Predator Requiem and this. But I hate this movie because of the fucked up message that it has, that it tries to cram down your throat that if you're not like these people, there's something wrong with you.
Well, I'll say that out of everything in the movie, every line that makes you cringe, every character that you want to slap, at the very least, the only consistent thing is that they're all fucked. Yeah.
Well, that's that. If you have any comments, questions, recommendations, or just a good old-fashioned hate mail, email me at wdijwpodcast@gmail.com. Don't be confused. It's just the initials of my show, followed by podcast, all one word, @gmail.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @somejerkfb or on Tumblr, however the fuck that works. It'll be found under Some Jerk from Boston, just like everything else. You can find more work by Mark by looking at Big Black Hat Man on YouTube and Facebook, as well as work by both Mark and James at manicexpression.webs.com. Until next time, don't do any of the following things if you want to live a long, happy life. join a bandit gang that makes more money as a band, describe your wife's death in detail to a complete stranger, have a gay romp with a man trying to kill you, or take romance advice from your shitty teenage daughters.